My daughter got married and said to me, "Mom, you don't need to come. There are already too many important people on the list." I stood there, phone in hand, heart racing. I, who had spent my life sewing her dreams stitch by stitch, was now the unwanted patch. But what she didn't know is that sometimes fate has a strange habit of returning everything that pride tries to erase. That day, I decided to go, not to be seen, but to see. And what I saw changed everything. I still remember the sound of the phone that Thursday afternoon. A sharp, insistent ring, like someone knocking on the door of your heart, asking for entry. I was mending a curtain rod when I answered, and the line came cold, blunt. "Mom, you don't have to come to the wedding. There are already too many important people on the list." It was like that, dry. For a second, I thought she was joking. We always fantasize about the relief before the fall. But her silence weighed heavily, and suddenly the living room clock stopped inside me. I gripped the phone cord like someone holding onto a banister in the dark. "Daughter, are you okay?" My voice came out soft, trying to piece together the sentence that tore me apart. The answer came polite, distant, filled with bleach to remove any stain from the past. "It's all right, Mom. It's just a matter of space." Space. Funny how that word becomes an excuse to expel us from our own memories. I smelled reheated coffee in the kitchen, heard the kettle whistle softly, and kept thinking that, deep down, the whole world fits in a hug, except me. There. I wanted to say, "I am your home," but my tongue turned to stone. My hand trembled. I rested my elbow on the table and stared at the cup marks on the surface, those little brown wheels that time had shaped like tree rings. I remembered the days when she studied at the table, and I stayed up all night, watching fever, chasing away fear, whispering prayers into the ears of fear. I saw her, small, in flannel pajamas, begging, "Mommy, stay here until I fall asleep." I stayed. I stayed for years, for decades. And now I was the one left outside. Outside the party. Outside the family name. "I don't want to expose you, Mom. That one hurt more than all the others." Expose what? My worn hand? My simple dress? My past, as someone who cleaned floors and swallowed tears with stale bread? I swallowed hard, because a mother learns early on to sow silence inside her mouth. I heard cars passing by on the street as if the city, oblivious, continued to dance. And I stood there without music, holding a phone that was like a knife without a handle. When she hung up, the house seemed bigger than necessary, like a dress too large for someone whose hope has thinned. I walked slowly around the room, checking the plants on the windowsill. The fern needed water, the rosemary needed care. I watered them both. It's funny how we look for work to keep from falling apart. I swept up non-existent crumbs, straightened invisibly crooked pictures, dusted memories that couldn't stand to shine. With each step, a little memory. The pink backpack on the first day of school, the scraped knees, the baby tooth in a glass of water, the fevers in the early morning, the warmth of the forehead against my palm. If I close my eyes, I can still smell the baby soap on the pillow. I closed them. I felt them. And I cried a little silently. I sat at the sewing machine and rested my chin on the lid. The lilac dress was folded, waiting for my courage. It wasn't luxury. It was a stitch of faith, thread upon thread, hope patiently sewn. The needle gleamed as if begging for work. My tired hands begged for meaning. I touched the fabric with my fingertips. It was soft, stubbornly alive, as if saying, "Don't hide me." I wanted to wear it not to be seen, but to belong. To belong in the photo every mother keeps, even when she's not in the frame. The kettle whistled louder and brought me back. I made a strong coffee, the kind that wakes even memories pretending to sleep. The first sip was bitter, unsweetened. The second, a touch sweet. I remembered when I used to sweeten her milk with honey, to scare away the monsters, I'd say. And I scared away so many. Except this one, the discreet monster of shame, who wears a well-cut suit and calls me inconvenient. Shame is an elegant creature. No more gloves, speaks softly, poses for photos. I picked up the phone again. My finger hovered over the contact, my girl, which no longer even matched the woman who'd shut me out of her life with half a dozen words. I wrote, "Can I see you first?" I deleted it. I wrote again, "I just want to leave you a kiss." I deleted it again. Finally, I sent a "I love you, I'm here." The message turned blue, unanswered. 2 lines that looked like healed wounds over splinters. I stared at the lit screen until my eyes burned, as if, by the force of my gaze, I could pull her back closer. The wall clock stubbornly resumed its count. Each tick was a nail in the lid of a box I couldn't yet name. I went to the window. The neighbor was washing his car. Children were playing hopscotch. A lady was pulling a shopping cart. The world goes on, I thought. The world goes on even when we stay. And I stayed, with a noise of life outside and a silence the size of a church inside me. I prayed a few words, shapeless, just a sigh addressed upward. Keep her. I returned to the machine, sat up straight, and straightened the fabric. Not because I would, but because I needed to use the pain. Anyone who has ever loved knows. Helplessness calls for busy hands. I made stitches that said calm. I made stitches that said breathe. I made stitches that said stand up. With each line, I stitched together a few scraps of myself. The zigzag of the needle became the soundtrack of the afternoon. And for a brief moment I felt that if I finished that dress, maybe I would finish falling. As the sun began to sink behind the rooftops, the room filled with a melancholy gold. The shadow of the fern traced long fingers on the wall, as if someone were touching my shoulder and whispering, "It's not the end." I wanted to believe it. I picked up the dress and hugged it like a newborn. Ridiculous, perhaps, but true. I smelled the fabric. It smelled of the soaps I can buy, the days I can afford, the life I could offer. And I smiled slightly because, between what's missing and what's left, I still have myself left. Before turning on the lights, I closed my eyes and heard, clearly, her laughter from when she was little, a loose little bell, running through the house. "Mom, look at me." I always looked. And now, without an invitation, without a seat, without a name on the list, I continued to watch from afar. There's a place where a mother doesn't need a place, inside her own chest. But that night, a thought came, gentle and dangerous, like someone opening a door with a felt key. What if I really do go? When the phone line cut off my chest, I went to the past to get warm. I remembered her first winter, so small she fit in the crook of my arm, wrapped in a woolen blanket my grandmother had woven. The milk heating on the stove, the hiss of steam, and I counted her heartbeats like someone guarding a treasure. There was a smell of cheap talcum powder and coconut soap that seemed to promise a simple yet whole life. I sang softly, a crooked song, and she fell asleep as if trusting the whole world within my lap. I still remember her first silly steps, that shaky-kneed dance around the room. Every stumble had my arm nearby, outstretched before the fall, ready to turn fall into laughter. When her knee scraped for the first time, I breathed slowly. It's okay, and the crying turned into sniffling. Back then, I performed small miracles. I pulled out invisible splinters, discovered monsters in the closet, and banished them with a candle and a kiss on the forehead. She believed in me, and I believed that was enough. School arrived with its harsh bells, and I became a bridge. I tied her hair with a lilac ribbon and slipped a wrapped sandwich into her backpack pocket, along with a little note. Be light. Sometimes there was no ham. There was a wish. Sometimes there was no yogurt. There was a tight hug at the door. I would leave, feigning haste, but I would stay behind the wall, just a minute longer, watching her head disappear down the hallway. Every mother has this trick, pretending to let go, while holding on with the invisible thread of her gaze. Adolescence arrived with high heels and short answers. The bedroom became a fortress, the loud music became a wall, and I knocked on the door as if asking for peace. May I? I couldn't always. I made the kitchen a sanctuary, a pot of beans simmering, the smell of garlic browning, a simple cake baking as if to say, come back. She would appear, bite the corner of the still warm bread, and share life's crumbs, the new friend, the demanding teacher, a somewhat silly heart that beat differently. I listened and, inside, carefully underlined each word. On the day her fever wouldn't break, I became a soldier of the dawn. I sat beside her bed and rested my forehead against hers, begging for some of that warmth for myself. Fennel tea, a damp cloth, a prayer without a period. The world outside was a distant noise. The only thing that mattered was the rhythm of her breathing, rising and falling in a rhythm I learned to follow. When dawn broke and she asked for bread and butter, I knew the night had given up on taking my little girl. There was also a time of big dreams, bigger than our house. College entrance exams, a badge, my first salary. I remember the day she arrived with eyes that sparkled with an expensive glow. Mom, I'm going to have the life you deserve. I smiled, of course, but inside I feared that, along the way, the beautiful life would decide to let her go. I continued to sew on buttons and straighten the world as best I could. A piece of advice here, a silence there, always a blessing. A mother's love is a discreet glue, secure without being obvious. I keep in my memory the morning of the torrential rain, when she missed the bus and cried nervously at the gate. I gave her my leaky umbrella and the plastic raincoat I kept for the storm. I stood soaked on the sidewalk, watching her go. It'll work out, I said, without any certainty, but with a stubborn faith, the kind we use as an extra layer. She looked back, already in the middle of the street, and waved her hand. Sometimes, a wave is all that holds the bridge between two banks. I also see myself in the hospital corridor, not because of illness, but because of fear. The job interview, the lump in my throat, the feeling of being small in front of automatic doors. I walked beside her, holding her purse and the rosary in my pocket. Breathe and remember who raised you, I said. She laughed, so stubborn. 2, I corrected. And there, in that freezing corridor, courage enveloped her body like a tailored coat. And I, foolishly, thanked a strength I couldn't name. Over time, the photographs began to change frames on their own. In place of crooked teeth and unkempt braids, professional portraits, smiles of someone who'd learned to fit in at elegant salons. I remained on this side, arranging the plants, making coffee, changing the dishcloths on Fridays. Sometimes she'd come. Sometimes she wouldn't. I never demanded her presence. I only demanded that, behind any expensive perfume, she remember the scent of coconut soap that washed away her early fears. And now, with the echo of that connection suspended from the living room ceiling, I revisit each memory, like someone running their fingers through old books. I blow away the dust, read slowly, understand less than I feel. If all this is love, why did it hurt so much to hear you don't have to come? Perhaps because a mother's love is a lifelong invitation, even when paper isn't enough. I stay here, hand-stitching the past, thread by thread, hoping that some invisible stitch still unites our two lives, and I wonder, what memory of hers will choose me tomorrow? The day after the call, she sent a short message, trying to soften the blow. Mom, it's not meant badly. It's just that the salon is small, you know? And his family is very elegant. I read and reread those words so many times I could almost hear them echoing, as if she were convincing herself of her own lie. With each reading, my heart shrank a little more. Was the salon small, or was it the space I occupied in her world? I spent the rest of the day in silence, stitching together memories. I remembered the times I'd worked miracles with a few cents, turning an old dress into a new one, a meager meal into a feast, a simple house into a home. And now everything I was seemed like a nuisance. Elegant family, funny, When she was little, the only necklace I had was the macaroni necklace she'd made herself in the school garden. And I wore it for days, proud. I knew there was shame behind the apology. The kind that hurts the person being rejected more than the person rejecting. The problem was never the size of the room, it was the size of the ego. I looked at my most recent photo with her. It was from a long ago birthday party, with a simple cake and genuine laughter. There, we were just mother and daughter. No last names, no labels. Just love, pure and awkward. I picked up the phone and wrote, "Daughter, if it's up to me, you don't even need a chair. I'll stand deep down. I just want to see you happy." I deleted it before sending. I felt like if I persisted, I'd be demeaning myself even further. A mother learns to keep quiet so as not to hurt, but silence weighs as much as words. The worst thing is pretending you understand. Pretending everything is okay when your soul cries out. At night, I sat on the porch, gazing at the overcast sky. Each star seemed like a memory, flickering faintly, struggling not to fade. I remembered our first trip together, sleeping on the bus, sharing a blanket and dreams. I'd say, "One day you'll see the world, my daughter." But I never imagined that, upon seeing it, she'd forget where she came from. The elegance she so admired seemed more like a cage with a ribbon. Deep down, I didn't entirely blame her. Life teaches us to be ashamed of being simple. It teaches us to measure love by the price of the dress and not by the stitching of the soul. Maybe she was just repeating what the world whispers, that a poor mother is a past to be erased. But still, the pain of being the secret no one wants to reveal is a wound that doesn't heal easily. The clock struck 9 when I heard the sound of neighbors laughing next door. Their daughter, younger than mine, was showing her mother her prom dress. They both laughed loudly, without ceremony, and I stood there, invisible, feeling an emptiness the wind couldn't fill. I clutched the lilac fabric in my hands. It wasn't ready yet, but it seemed to understand my sadness. I wondered if she would tell the guests I wasn't invited. Maybe she would say I was sick, or that I chose not to go. People easily believe those who speak beautifully. I, who always spoke from the heart, learned that sincerity doesn't suit a luxury salon. There, what counts is disguise, the rehearsed smile, the mechanical applause. Still, there was something inside me that wouldn't give up, an invisible, stubborn thread that said, "She'll have time to realize." I clung to that thread like someone holding a rosary in a storm, and I prayed, not to be invited, but to be remembered. Because being forgotten by those you created is the death that comes in life. When I closed my eyes that night, the sound of the words "elegant family" still echoed within me. And I wondered, before falling asleep, if elegance is made of shame, then what's left of dignity? The next morning, I opened the closet and there it was, the lilac dress. The same one I'd started sewing months earlier, when I still believed it would be worn at my daughter's wedding. It was simple, but made with such care that it seemed to breathe. I touched the fabric slowly, feeling its soft texture between my fingers, as if the cloth understood my hesitation. With each stitch I'd made, there was also a prayer, a hope that I would be seen with pride. I remember choosing the shade, lilac, her favorite color as a girl. "Mom, it looks like the color of a happy cloud," she would say, spinning around the room with a sheet tied around her waist. I sewed the dress with that in mind, the innocent smile of a childhood that time shouldn't have erased. But now, that color seemed to mock me, as if to say, "Do you still believe you belong to that dream?" I laid the dress on the bed and sat beside it, not daring to put it on. The sun streamed in through the window, leaving a golden trail across the fabric. It was beautiful, too beautiful to be forgotten. And for a moment, I considered giving it away. But my hands wouldn't let me. "Not yet," I murmured. The dress seemed to have a soul, as if waiting for the right moment to be worn. I grabbed the tape measure, out of habit, and measured her waist, bust, and hem. Everything still fit perfectly, unlike the place I no longer fit in her life. Funny how the body stays true to its shape, but the bonds of the heart unravel without warning. I felt a pang in my chest, not of longing, but of wounded pride, and at the same time, a tenderness I couldn't suppress. As I folded the fabric, I heard the sewing machine creaking, begging for life. I turned on the motor, only to hear that familiar hum. It sounded like the murmur of my mother, who taught me to sew as a girl. She'd say, "Sewing is loving with your hands, daughter." And perhaps that's why I was still attached to that dress. It was the last love I'd sewn without realizing it would also be the last to go unrequited. I picked up a piece of white lace and considered adding a new hem, as if a single detail could mend what was broken. But I stopped. There are pains that can't be disguised with embellishments. I looked at the dress, hanging on the closet door, and wondered if I would ever wear it. Maybe not to a wedding, but to some new beginning. Because every woman who has loved too much needs a day to dress herself. The afternoon passed slowly, like thread tangling in a needle. Sometimes I caught myself imagining the scene, my daughter entering arm in arm with the groom's father, the guests smiling, the lights twinkling, and I, invisible, watching from afar, perhaps from across the street. Would she look at the door, expecting to see me? Or would she pretend I never existed? I folded the dress and put it in the back of the closet, behind the shoe boxes and souvenirs no one wants to open anymore. I closed the door carefully, as if closing a chapter, and stood before the mirror. The reflection stared back at me with tired eyes, but there was a stubborn flame there, a spark of dignity that not even oblivion could extinguish. That night, I dreamed about the dress. It lay on a chair, illuminated by a soft light, and I watched it from afar, like someone watching an old friend who doesn't know whether to embrace or let go. When I woke, I could still smell the new fabric mixed with the scent of wildflowers. I sighed. "One day, you'll be of use to me for something beautiful," I said, touching the cloth tenderly. And maybe that was it. The dress wasn't for her wedding. It was for my own awakening. Only at the time, I didn't know it yet. I still believed that if I finished sewing it, maybe she'd remember me. And so, I kept it tucked away, waiting for the day when love found the courage to come out of the closet. After that call and putting away the dress, silence became my companion. The house seemed to have swallowed all the sounds that once made it alive. The clock's ticking dragged on, heavy, as if marking the time of an absence. Even the wind seemed to creep in slowly through the cracks, afraid to disturb. I walked through the rooms like someone visiting a museum. Every corner held an invisible portrait of when we were happy. The living room chair still bore the sag of her body, from the days when she'd come home tired from school and lie down to watch television. The curtains, a little faded, swayed on their own as if they remembered the time when her laughter echoed through it. I remember when I'd say, "This house is small, but full of love." Now, it was just small. Love, there, only in photographs. The radio I used to turn on in the morning went silent. The smell of freshly brewed coffee lost its meaning. Even the sound of the sewing machine sounded sad to me. The motor turned, but my heart didn't follow. I began talking to myself, as women do who have talked too much to fate and received silence as an answer. Sometimes I pretended she was still there. "Daughter, do you want more coffee?" But the answer was always an echo of nothingness. Late in the afternoon, the sun streamed through the window and painted the floor golden. It was the same sun that once illuminated our Sunday games, when we baked simple cakes and danced in the kitchen. I found myself smiling to myself, remembering her spinning around in her apron, her cheeks smeared with flour. But the smile was short-lived. The good memory is the cruelest, because it shows what time has taken away without asking permission. I started rummaging through the drawers, as if trying to find a piece of my own history. I found old drawings of hers, a little house, a smiling sun, and the two of us holding hands. Below, in crooked letters, was written, "Mommy and I forever." Those words hit me hard. Forever. A beautiful expression until the day someone decides to leave. That night, I sat in bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to understand when love turned into embarrassment. Was it when she met her fiancé? Or when she learned that the world judges people by what they wear, not how they feel? I closed my eyes and silently asked God to show me where I'd gone wrong. But what came to me was a gentle memory, me and her, sitting on the couch, watching the rain through the window. "Mom, is the sound of the rain sad?" "No," I replied. "It's just the sky letting off steam." I stayed awake all night, listening to the sound of rain falling on the roof. Each drop seemed to repeat her name. I wondered if, wherever she was, it was also raining. If she thought of me for even a second. The pain of absence is like a leak. It doesn't flood all at once, but it doesn't let you sleep. In the morning, the house smelled damp and lonely. I made coffee, but forgot to sweeten it. The bitter taste seemed to match the day. I grabbed the cup, went to the window, and watched the world go on as normal. The baker, the mailman, the neighbor's dog. Everyone went about their daily routines, while mine seemed to have stopped. I realized that when a mother is forgotten, time forgets her too. That silence in the house, which had previously frightened me, began to feel familiar. It was as if the walls had learned my breathing, the floor the rhythm of my steps, and the windows the weight of my gaze. And it was there, in that emptiness that had once ached, that I felt something different emerge. A quiet, almost imperceptible desire to get up. Because if the house could stay standing, maybe I could too. But before I could go on, the echo of her last question came back to me. "Mom, you don't have to come. There are already so many important people." And for the first time, I answered in my mind, "But no one important will love you like I do." I woke before the sun. The silence in the house was still the same, but something inside me had changed. There was a restlessness, a soft, almost sacred call. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the cold floor beneath my feet, and looked at the closet. I knew the lilac dress was inside, folded, waiting. For a moment, I considered leaving it where it was. But a still voice, perhaps my mother's, perhaps Courage's, whispered, "Go." And I did. I opened the wardrobe door carefully, as if opening a portal. The fabric shimmered in the pale morning light, and my heart beat differently. I ran my hand over the cloth, smoothed the seams, and remembered each stitch made with hope. That dress wasn't just clothing. It was a witness. A witness to the love that asked for nothing in return, to the forgiveness that learned to walk alone, and to the faith that insisted on not dying. I put it on without haste. The zipper rose smoothly, as if fate approved my choice. The mirror reflected a tired woman, yes, but whole. For a moment, I saw in myself the mother, the seamstress, the woman who supported a home with her own hands. And I smiled. Not a smile of joy, but of dignity. Because there are days when the greatest act of self-love is not hiding. I grabbed my old purse, the one she'd given me with my first paycheck. Inside, I put a white handkerchief, the lipstick I saved for special occasions, and an envelope with a photograph of us, me and her in the park, genuinely laughing. I didn't know why, but I felt I had to take it. Maybe to remind myself that we were once happy without needing invitations or approval. Before leaving, I glanced around the house. The clock on the wall read 7:20, and for the first time, the ticking didn't seem painful. It felt like a countdown to something inevitable. I ran my hand through the plants, filled the kettle, and turned off the lights. "Look after the house for me," I murmured. It was a small but sincere farewell. The street was still wet from the previous night's rain. The smell of wet earth rose from the ground and accompanied me as I walked to the bus stop. Each step felt stitched together by memories. I remembered the day I'd walked her to school for the first time, hand in hand, saying, "You'll go far, my daughter." And now she was gone, far enough to leave me behind. But still, I walked toward her. The bus arrived, and as I boarded, I felt the curious gaze of some people. Perhaps they were surprised by the lilac dress, or perhaps they saw a mother trying to recover a piece of her own heart. I sat by the window, watching the city wake up. The fogged glass reflected my face, and for a second, I thought I saw the girl I once was, the one who believed that love could fix everything. Along the way, fear visited me. What if she got angry? What if they sent me away? What if I regretted it? But along with the fear came something stronger. The certainty that I needed to be there, even if it was just to watch from afar. A mother doesn't need an invitation to witness the happiness of her own flesh and blood. Her presence is the invitation itself. The bus stopped in front of the big city, with its tall buildings and hustle and bustle. I got off, straightened my dress, and took a deep breath. People passed me by without noticing, and it was good that way. I didn't want to be noticed, I just wanted to see. See if she was okay, if she was happy, if the love I once planted had blossomed, even if I was no longer part of the garden. And there, amidst the noise of the city and the silence within me, I realized something strange. There was no anger, only longing and a kind of serenity that arises when pain has learned to walk silently. So I held tightly to the handle of my bag and thought, today I'm going. Even if no one is waiting for me, I'm going. The bus rocked slowly, as if lulling my thoughts. The landscape outside the window alternated between fields, factories, and old mansions. Each seemed to tell a story I already knew. The sound of the engine mingled with my heart, a strange rhythm between fear and hope. I held my bag tightly in my lap, as if holding my own destiny. The fabric of my lilac dress brushed against my skin, reminding me, with every movement, that I was going, even without knowing if I would be welcome. People were talking quietly, laughing, talking about marriage, family, the simple things in life. I listened to it all in silence, my eyes lost on the road. At one point, a lady next to me looked at me and said, "Going to a nice event?" I smiled weakly and replied, "Something like that." She smiled back, unaware that, inside, I was carrying a knot made of love, longing, and a little shame. I remember the first time I traveled with my daughter. She must have been about 8 years old. It was on one of those same roads, and she kept asking questions. "Mom, where does the sun go when it sleeps?" "To shine on another mother who also can't rest," I'd reply. She'd laugh and say the world was round so no one would be left in the dark forever. And now, so many years later, I was the one traveling toward the shadows. With every mile, courage mixed with guilt. Was I wrong to go? Would my presence ruin her day? But then I thought, a mother's love isn't an invasion, it's instinct. And instinct doesn't ask permission. I closed my eyes and tried to pray, but the words escaped me. All I could say was, "Lord, may she be happy, even if I can only see it from afar." The smell of gasoline and dust filled the air. The wind blew in through the half-open window and ruffled my gray hair. I looked at my hands, scarred, steady, accustomed to work. Those same hands that had once held hers to cross the street, that had spent nights measuring fever and days weaving dreams. Now they trembled a little, not with age, but with emotion. I was about to see the fruit of all I'd sown, and perhaps, also, the thorn that had grown alongside. The driver announced the next stop, downtown, full stop. My heart raced. From the bus stop to the wedding venue, it would still be a walk. I got off slowly, feeling the firm ground beneath my feet, as if stepping once again into my own destiny. The city seemed enormous, bustling with people, well-dressed. I, in my lilac dress and worn shoes, was almost a portrait out of frame. But I kept going. Every corner smelled of expensive perfume and artificial flowers. I saw sparkling shop windows, brides on mannequins, impeccable suits. And I wondered if the love she felt for her fiancé was as solid as the one she once felt for me. It's strange how life turns. One day, we're someone's center. The next, we're just a memory. But still, I walked, because mothers don't give up, they just change their approach. The taxi I took didn't seem to understand my anxiety. "Address of the salon, please," the driver said, and my voice almost cracked. Along the way, I saw trees decorated with lights and children laughing on the sidewalk. It was a beautiful Saturday, worthy of a wedding. And suddenly, a tear escaped, not of sadness, but of pent-up love, of knowing that, even though I wasn't invited, I was still a part of that day. When the car stopped in front of the salon, I felt butterflies in my stomach. The mirrored walls reflected a world that wasn't mine, elegant, distant, inaccessible. I took a deep breath. The driver opened the door and said, "We're here, ma'am." I paid the fare and stood there, watching the entrance. People laughing, photographers clicking, luxurious dresses, and me, with the lilac of simplicity, standing before a portal between past and present. And in that moment, before taking the first step, the fear returned with a vengeance. What if she saw me and pretended not to recognize me? What if a mother's love, in the face of such elegance, seemed too small? I closed my eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and thought, I didn't come to be seen. I came to see. And with that thought, I took my first step toward the destiny I had forged. As the car pulled away, I stood in front of the salon, observing a world that seemed to ignore me. The walls were made of glass, gleaming as if polished with vanity. Inside, golden lights played over expensive dresses and muffled laughter. For a moment, I considered going back, but my feet, stubborn as a mother's heart, decided to stay. I took a deep breath and took my first steps, feeling the cold of the floor through my worn heels. There were security guards at the entrance, young men in black suits with trained eyes to filter out who belonged and who didn't. I approached calmly, feigning confidence, as if I already knew the way. One of them looked me up and down and politely asked, "Your name, please?" I smiled and replied, "I'm not on the list, my son. I just came to drop off a gift." He hesitated, studying me, and I finally added, "I promise I won't be long." Perhaps he saw something in my gaze, because he simply led the way. The ballroom was a universe unto itself. The scent of expensive flowers mixed with the guests' perfumes created an almost suffocating atmosphere. The floor shone so brightly that I could see the reflection of my lilac dress, simple yet vibrant, clashing with everything around it. The orchestra played softly, a romantic melody that seemed to mock my tight chest. Each table was an island of artificial smiles, and I was a castaway. I walked slowly, going unnoticed, pretending to be a member of staff, maybe a latecomer. I stayed near the back of the room, where the lights were softer. And then I saw her, my daughter, dressed in white, beautiful, radiant, with her hair tied up just as I'd always imagined. For a second, I forgot to breathe. It was her, the same girl who once asked me to tie my shoelaces before running. And there she was, running away from me. People rose. The ceremony began. I hid behind a column, where I could see without being seen. The celebrant's words echoed through the hall. Love is patient, love is kind. I closed my eyes and thought of how many times I had been patient and kind, even when the world told me to give up. When I opened my eyes, she was laughing, and that laughter, even from a distance, still felt like home. But then something inside me snapped. Her gaze crossed the room and found me. For a second, just a second, I recognized the shock. Her breath hitched, her smile froze. I saw it. But then she looked away, as if she didn't see, as if she'd never seen. I felt my heart tighten like fabric being hastily sewn together. She pretended she didn't know me. That sentence echoed inside me like silent thunder. I stood there, motionless, trying not to cry. One of the bridesmaids whispered something, and a woman with a clipboard came toward me. "Ma'am, can I help you?" she asked with practiced politeness. "No, dear. I was just passing through." She smiled tightly and replied, This area is reserved for family. Family. The word fell to the floor and shattered into 1,000 pieces. I took a deep breath and said, "Yeah, I know." I walked away slowly, walking to the side door. Each step felt like a goodbye. Outside, the night air greeted me with the scent of wilted flowers and a chilly wind. I rested my hands on the railing, trying to comprehend what had just happened. I wasn't expecting hugs or speeches. I just wanted to be acknowledged. I just wanted a look, the same look that once told me, "I love you," without words. From where I stood, I could still hear the music and the clapping. Inside, the world continued to shine. Outside, time stood still. I leaned against the wall, and a tear fell slowly. The lilac dress, which had once seemed a symbol of hope, was now a raw wound. But even so, I didn't regret it, because sometimes seeing is enough, even if the price is being invisible. And it was at that moment, between the distant sound of the party and the silence in my chest, that a male voice behind me said gently, "You are the mother of the bride, aren't you?" I can still feel that moment, as if time had stopped. I was leaning against the wall, the sound of the party muffled by the glass, when his voice called me, "Mother of the bride." I turned slowly. He was a tall man in a dark suit, with a serene gaze and a slight, non-judgmental smile. For a moment, I thought he was mistaken. No one there seemed to see me, and suddenly someone did. "Yes, I am," I replied, a whisper of pride and shame. He nodded, as if he already knew. "Come with me, please." My first impulse was to refuse. I don't want to cause trouble. I just stopped by to see from afar. But there was something in his expression, a firm kindness, a confidence that disarmed me. Without quite understanding, I followed. My steps were short, my heart pounding. The lights of the hall reflected in the windows, and I saw my shadow walking beside his. That's when I realized that, after so long, someone was offering me a seat. He led me down a quiet hallway to a small room. Inside, the sounds of the party were only a distant murmur. On a table sat a forgotten bouquet and 2 champagne flutes. "Please have a seat," he said. I sat, still confused. He took a deep breath before continuing. "My name is Jonathan Walters. I don't think you'll remember me." I strained, searching my memory for his face, but all I found were memories of office smells, papers, and a bygone afternoon. "Many years ago, I worked in the office where you cleaned," he said. "I was young, in debt, and without hope. One day, when I didn't even have enough money to eat, you offered me a loaf of bread and a word I've never forgotten. 'You'll be proud of who you are.'" My heart sank. I remembered that day, the pale, thin boy sitting in the corner, his eyes lost. I gave him half my snack and wished him luck. I never thought fate would hold that in store. "I never forgot," he continued, smiling through teary eyes. "Today I'm a businessman, and I was the one who financed this wedding." I felt my palms sweat. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. He lowered his voice. "When I saw your name on the guest list, and then saw it crossed off, I understood. And I thought it was time to repay you for what you did for me." His words fell on me like rain after a long drought. I didn't know whether to cry, thank him, or apologize for forgetting him. "I just did what anyone would do," I murmured, trying to hide my emotion. He shook his head. "No, you did what almost no one would. And today, you'll be attending your daughter's wedding, but from the place you truly deserve." My eyes filled with tears. "No, please, I don't want to embarrass her. She doesn't want me here." He leaned in gently and replied, "She doesn't have to. You already belong here." Those words struck me in a way no other could. For the first time in years, I felt like the universe still knew how to balance the heart's accounts. I remained silent, staring at the ground, trying to hold back tears. And then he extended his hand. "May I walk with you?" That gesture, simple, respectful, sincere, reminded me of the times I taught my daughter to walk, offering her the same hand. I accepted. I stood up slowly, straightened my lilac dress, and before we left, he said, "Today, you're going to be seen." As we walked back to the salon, I felt something inside me ignite. It wasn't vanity, nor revenge. It was simply dignity. I was about to enter that salon again, but this time no longer as an intruder. And before I crossed the threshold, I glanced at the glass and saw my reflection, a simple but whole woman, ready to be remembered. We returned to the ballroom through a side door. The lights seemed brighter now, as if the whole world had turned on at once. Jonathan walked ahead of me with firm steps, and I tried to keep up, even as my heart pounded in my chest. The clink of glasses, the murmur of the guests, the music in the background, everything blended into a distant hum. All I could think of was his words. "Today, you will be seen." When we stopped in the center of the hall, I felt all eyes turn to us. Time seemed to stand still. Jonathan asked the master of ceremonies for the microphone, and his calm, firm voice cut through the silence. "Before I continue, I'd like to say a few words." The murmur died down. People shifted in their seats, curious. My daughter, at the altar, watched me from afar, uncomprehending. Jonathan took a deep breath. "Many here know me as the man who made this wedding possible. But the real reason I'm here is this woman." And then he turned to me. The entire room followed suit. I felt my legs wobble, but I remained standing. Many years ago, when I was just a desperate, aimless clerk, this woman reached out to me. She didn't have much, but what she had, she shared. And she told me something that changed my life. Some guests looked at each other in surprise. He continued, "If I'm here today, if this party exists, it's because of her. It was this woman's kindness that taught me the value of gratitude. And, ironically, she almost missed out on this celebration. Her name was on the list, but it was crossed off." A murmur of astonishment ran through the room. I saw faces turn to my daughter, who lowered her eyes. My chest burned, not with anger, but with pent-up emotion. Jonathan continued, "But tonight, I want everyone to know who she is. This woman is the mother of the bride, the strongest, most generous, and most dignified woman I've ever known." His words echoed through the room, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Respect. A silent but profound respect coming from every corner. The applause began, tentatively, and then grew louder, filling the room with a sound that mingled awe and admiration. I didn't know where to look. Tears fell uncontrollably. Jonathan took my hand and led me to a chair in the front row, directly facing the altar. "Your place is here," he said with a serene smile. I simply nodded, unable to respond. My daughter looked at me with teary eyes. For the first time, I noticed guilt on her face, a mixture of regret and shame. Her fiancé, beside her, held her hand, visibly uncomfortable. I, however, felt no resentment. I felt only the sweet weight of divine justice, the kind that arrives without warning, at the exact moment the soul needs to be lifted. The ceremony resumed. The celebrant's words, which had previously seemed distant, now sounded different. True love is the kind that recognizes where it came from. I smiled softly. Jonathan remained by my side, silent, as if he knew I needed someone there just to remind me that I existed. As the vows were exchanged, a strange peace washed over me. It wasn't joy, nor was it sadness. It was something in between. It was as if, finally, I could breathe without guilt. I was there, in my place, not out of pity, but out of merit. And it was in that moment that I realized, sometimes God disguises himself as coincidence and gives us back what the world tried to take away, our worth. But inside me, an insistent question still pulsed, subtle and dangerous. Would she come to me after all? After Jonathan's speech, the entire room fell silent. It was as if the air had become too dense to breathe. I looked around and saw confused faces, others embarrassed, and some moved. But my eyes sought only one, hers. My daughter. She remained motionless, the bouquet trembling in her hands. When our eyes met, it was as if all the years of distance had condensed into a single second, a second capable of telling a lifetime. She took a step forward. I saw her lips part, but no words came out. The celebrant, sensing the tension, tried to restore the atmosphere. "We can continue this ceremony." But no one was paying attention. Her gaze was still locked on mine and mine on hers. There was a mixture of love and shame, guilt and recognition. I saw her smile again, her cheeks cake-smeared, smiling at me in the kitchen. And for an instant, the bride disappeared. Only the girl who once promised never to leave me remained. She walked down the aisle slowly, the click of her heels echoing across the shiny floor. Each step felt like a plea for forgiveness. When she reached me, her hands were shaking. "Mom," the word came out shaky, almost a sob. I felt the ground slip away from under my feet. It was the first time she had called me that in public since the engagement began. "Mom, I'm sorry." The guests looked at each other, and the entire room watched in silence. I wanted to say something, but my voice failed. I touched her face, with the same hands that had once held her head when she had a fever. "You didn't need this, daughter," I murmured. "I just wanted to see you happy." She was crying, her mascara running, her bouquet dangling. I was ashamed of what others would think, and now I realized I should have been proud. There was a murmur in the audience. Some wiped their eyes. Jonathan, silent, watched from afar, with that discreet smile of someone who understands that fate likes to be poetic. I hugged my daughter, inhaling her expensive perfume mixed with the scent of her tears, a scent that, for the first time, didn't push me away, but brought me back to her. "You never had to prove anything to me," I whispered. "I just wanted to see you get married, to know you were okay." She squeezed my hand and said softly, "I wanted so much for the day to be perfect, but I forgot that perfect is where you are." Those words broke me inside. All the pride, all the pain, all the loneliness dissolved into silent tears. The celebrant cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Shall we continue?" My daughter nodded, still holding my hand, and for the first time that night, I felt truly part of the moment, not because of the chair in front, not because of the speech, but because love had returned. I stood there until the end of the ceremony, with Jonathan by my side and my daughter smiling through her tears. With each word spoken, a piece of what was broken was put back together, even if crooked. And when the "I do" echoed through the hall, it wasn't just their marriage that was consummated, it was also the reunion of a mother and daughter. But deep down I knew, even forgiveness, when it arrives, leaves a shadow. And as the lights dimmed and applause filled the air, a question pierced my heart. Is love enough to erase oblivion? After the ceremony, people resumed conversation. Glasses were raised, and music filled the hall once more. But inside me, the sound was different, a deep murmur somewhere between forgiveness and what still hurt. My daughter led me to a more private corner, away from prying eyes. The soft candlelight trembled between us, as if the room itself were afraid to intrude. She breathed heavily, trying to find words. I waited, quiet, my heart open but wounded. "Mom, I don't know where to begin." Her voice sounded like a child asking for a hug and permission at the same time. "Start with the truth," I replied simply. She lowered her head. I distanced myself because I felt inferior around his family. They're rich, sophisticated, and I was afraid they'd make fun of you. She paused for a long time before confessing. I was ashamed of the woman who loved me most. I felt a lump rise in my throat, but I swallowed it. Ashamed of what, my daughter? Of who taught you to be strong? Of who stitched together what the world tore so you could pass through whole? She wept, the tears flowing unabated. I was a coward, Mother. And now, seeing you here, in that beautiful dress, I realize how small I was. I looked at her silently. The pain of being humiliated doesn't disappear with an apology, but there's something in a child's repentant gaze that disarms even the most stubborn resentment. I placed my hand on her face, wiping away her tears. You thought wealth would make you great, but the true luxury is a pure heart. I would have been happy to see you marry, even from the outside. But you took away my right to be proud. She sobbed and threw herself into my arms. I ruined everything, Mother. I hugged her to my chest, feeling the same warmth as when I was a girl. No, daughter, you've simply forgotten who you are, and that over time life teaches us. Jonathan approached respectfully, placing 2 glasses on the table. I think you deserve to toast to a new beginning, he said, his tone calm and soul-searing. She thanked him with a look, and I simply nodded. You don't know what this moment represents, he murmured before walking away. And I thought, he has no idea how much it means to me, too. My daughter took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. Mom, what can I do to fix this? She smiled sadly. Nothing that needs rushing. Forgiveness isn't a key, it's a path. And sometimes the path is long. She nodded, head down, and said, Then let me walk by your side. It was the first time in a long time that I felt hope have a voice. The room was still alive, but for me, the world had shrunk to that small space between us. The music in the background, the golden lights, the clinking of glasses, everything seemed distant. What existed there was only a mother's heart, beating again in time with her daughter's. But even amidst the reconciliation, there was something I needed to say, a truth I'd kept hidden for years. Daughter, I began, love isn't measured by appearances nor by applause. I gave you everything I could, and you taught me something too, that even love needs limits, so it doesn't become humiliation. She looked at me in surprise, but understood. I know, Mom, and I'll never forget it. We hugged again, tighter this time. The music swelled, the guests applauded the couple, and the entire room seemed to revolve around a single lesson, that true love, even when wounded, can still heal. But as I held her, a feeling passed through me like an omen. Some wounds heal, but leave marks that never disappear. As the party began to disperse, the lights in the hall seemed softer, as if the room itself wanted to rest. People spoke softly, toasted, and the sound of silverware hitting plates mingled with the distant echo of the orchestra. My daughter called me to the back garden, where the lights strung between the trees swayed in the wind. It was a quieter place, away from the hubbub, the kind of setting fate chooses when 2 souls need to shed their appearance. She stood there for a moment, staring at the ground. Mom, can I ask you something? She said hesitantly. Yes, daughter. How can you look at me without anger, after what I did? The question was filled with guilt, and in that instant I realized forgiveness hadn't yet been understood, only offered. I took a deep breath before answering. Because a mother's love is older than hurt. It was there before you were born. She cried. Tears streamed shamelessly, wetting the neck of her white dress. I thought being strong meant pretending you weren't missed. I thought I needed to distance myself to grow. I smiled sadly. It's just that the world taught you wrong, my daughter. Being strong isn't hiding who gave you roots. It's knowing you can flourish without cutting the stem. She looked at me, her eyes welling. I was so unfair, Mother. And now, seeing you here, I can only feel ashamed of myself. Shame heals nothing, daughter, I murmured. Only regret accompanied by action. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it allows us to continue writing without tearing up the old pages. She nodded, wiping away her tears. I want to start over. I want you to come back into my life, into my home, into my heart. Those words pierced me like a ray of sunshine after a storm. For a moment, time stood still. I remembered the days when she slept in my lap, the nights when I made promises to heaven that she would have a future. And now she was begging to come back, not home but to me. I touched her face and said, "I never left, daughter. They just left me outside for a while." She knelt, crying, and held my hands. "Forgive me, mother. Please." Kneeling before the one who created you is a gesture the world doesn't teach. Only the heart understands. I knelt down too and hugged her, right there, amidst the flowers and the wind. "I forgive you, yes," I whispered. "But forgive yourself, too. Because guilt is a prison, and I don't want to see you locked in it." The silence that followed was light. There was no longer the weight of shame, nor the emptiness of distance. Just two women, mother and daughter, breathing the same air after so long in different worlds. The sound of laughter inside seemed distant, as if the rest of the world had become too small to fit in that moment. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I love you, Mom, more than anything." I closed my eyes and let the tears fall, unafraid, unhurried. "I know, daughter. And that's why, even though I was hurt, I never stopped loving you." We stayed like that for long minutes, in silence, just listening to the wind rustling the leaves and our hearts settling. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't need words, just presence. And that night, amid the garden lights and the scent of sleeping flowers, I felt something inside me finally rest. But as I held her, a soft, insistent thought visited me. Had she really learned, or would life still have to teach her the rest? The night was already drawing to a close when the party ended. The guests began to leave, taking with them flowers, souvenirs, and rehearsed laughter. My daughter and I remained in the garden, still holding each other, as if time had forgotten us. The strung lights flickered, and the wind carried the scent of flowers mixed with the sweet smell of cake wafting from the hall. For a moment, the silence felt sacred, the kind of silence that only comes after a storm. She pulled away slowly, holding my hands. "Mom, thank you for coming," she said in a soft, almost childlike voice. "I don't know what this day would have been like if you hadn't been here." I smiled, even though my heart was breaking. "You would have gotten married anyway, daughter. But now, perhaps, you'll remember that you had a mother watching over you, even when you didn't want her to." She lowered her eyes, embarrassed, and replied, "I just want you to know that this will never happen again." I looked at her impeccable dress and my own lilac one, marked by the dust of the road. They were two different stories, stitched together by the same invisible thread. "Life will continue to test you, my daughter," I said calmly. "I won't always be around to remind you who you are, but what I taught you will stay with you if you want to hear it." She nodded, and the tears began to appear again, discreetly. "I want to, Mother. This time, I want to learn." We sat side by side on a stone bench. The sky, already gray with dawn, seemed to watch us silently. "You know what's funny?" I continued. "I came here thinking fate would bring me more pain. And it did. But it also brought me back the daughter I thought I'd lost." She smiled, moved. "Maybe love needs to be broken to be understood." "Yes," I replied, looking at the horizon. "Sometimes it's in the shards that we see the clearest reflection." A car honked at the entrance. It was the driver waiting for her honeymoon. She looked at me hesitantly. "I should go with him, but I don't want to leave you alone." I touched her face, firmly but tenderly. "Go, daughter. Life is calling you. I've had my time to dream. Now it's yours." She hugged me tightly, a hug that seemed to take in all the lost years. "I love you, Mom." "I know my love," I replied. "And that's enough." She got into the car, waving through the window. I stood there, watching the red lights disappear around the bend in the road. The wind blew on my face, cold but invigorating. I felt a lump in my throat, not of pain, but of gratitude. Sometimes life takes away to teach us, and gives back when we've already learned the value of what we lost. I returned to the empty hall. Jonathan was still there, gathering some papers. He saw me and smiled. You got what you deserved, peace. I replied with a weary but serene look. No, my son. We don't earn peace, we choose it. He laughed, agreeing. Then you chose well. I said goodbye and walked to the exit. Dawn was already breaking, and the first ray of sunlight hit my lilac dress, making it shine as if it were new. As I walked down the sidewalk, I felt a light weight on my shoulders, the kind of lightness that only comes after forgiveness. The city was waking, the birds were singing, and within me was a beautiful silence, the same silence that precedes a new beginning. I knew that from that day on, nothing would be the same. But I also knew that, for the first time in a long time, I was ready to move on. And it was then, in the middle of the almost deserted street, that I looked up to the sky and murmured, "Thank you, my God, for letting me go, even when my heart wanted to stay." The next day, I woke to birdsong and a shy sun streaming through the window. The house was silent again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It was a different silence, one filled with peace, not absence. I walked to the kitchen, made a fresh cup of coffee, and sat at the table, watching the steam rise from the cup. I thought about everything that had happened, the humiliation, the reunion, the forgiveness. It was as if each pain had served as a brick to build a new version of myself. I realized that sometimes life needs to break us to reveal what was hidden inside. I spent years believing that love meant accepting everything silently, that being a mother meant always being available, even without being invited. But that day, I understood that love also has a backbone, and that true forgiveness isn't about bending, it's about rising up with ease. I learned that there's a quiet dignity in standing tall, even when they try to erase you from history. I looked at the lilac dress hanging on the chair. It was no longer a symbol of pain, but of rebirth. I considered keeping it, but changed my mind. It deserved the world, not the darkness of a closet. I grabbed a pair of scissors and carefully began cutting the fabric into smaller pieces. Each piece would be used to make something new, maybe pillows, maybe a quilt. It was my way of telling myself that even what was meant to hurt can be transformed into beauty. As I sewed, memories came back like little flashes. My daughter's smile at the altar, Jonathan's gaze, the moment I heard, "Mom," again after so many years. I felt a deep gratitude, not only for what I had regained, but for what I had lost, because it was loss that taught me the value of everything. Pain, I realized, is a demanding but fair teacher. It teaches without mercy, but transforms without asking permission. I picked up the photo I'd brought to the wedding, me and her in the park, laughing, our hair windblown. I framed it and left it on the table. "That's life, my girl," I murmured, looking at the picture. "One day you'll understand that the love that seemed small was actually the greatest of all." My chest tightened, but this time I didn't cry. The tears had already served their purpose. In the afternoon, I went for a walk. The wind gently blew against my face, and the trees seemed greener. People hurried past, and I calmly watched. It was as if the world had the same rhythm as always, but I had learned to move at my own pace. The pain no longer hurt, it only taught me. And it was there, amidst the noise of the cars and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, that I realized I had come into being again. The lesson wasn't in the humiliation, nor in the forgiveness, but in what remained afterward, the serenity of knowing that love isn't measured by presence, but by permanence. And I remained. Even if the world changed, even if life went on, the love I gave would live on in every gesture, in every memory, in every thread of that lilac dress. Deep down, I understood that this is what being a mother is, continuing to love, even when the party is over, even when the lights go out, even when your name is crossed off the list. Because a mother's love doesn't need an invitation, it's your home. And on that calm morning, amidst the smell of coffee and the sound of birdsong, I smiled to myself. Not out of victory, but out of understanding. I had finally learned my lesson. True love doesn't demand a place. It remains, even when the world tries to push it out of the picture. You know, sometimes life invites us to a dance we didn't receive an invitation to, but it is in this silence on the empty bench that true love shows its face. I learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing not to carry the weight the other person dropped. I learned that dignity is the most beautiful clothing a woman can wear, and a mother's love that never goes out of style, never fades, never needs an audience. Today, when I think about that day, I no longer feel pain. I feel gratitude, because it was there, in that hall full of lights and vanities, that destiny gave me back what pride had stolen from me, the right to be seen. And I realized that being a mother isn't about being present at parties, it's about remaining in the memories, even when they erase your name from the list. So I ask you, how many people have you left out of your own life? How many times has pride made you forget who really loved you when no one else saw you? Enjoy it while there's still time. Ask for forgiveness. Forgive too, before silence turns into longing. If this story touched your heart, like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because stories like this are memories that time cannot erase.